recording, I might repeat. So hi everyone, this is Dr. Alana, and today we're talking about research problem, statements, purpose, significance. May seem sometimes like they're all kind of one big thing, but there are some, not exactly rules, but standards for these. Not that everybody matches them, not that everybody needs to, not that every committee looks for them, but to the extent you can hit that standard, then probably you're going to have a much easier time getting things through your committee. So with that as an option, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing a 5-chapter dissertation or thesis, or you're doing articles that then you're put together at the end, or you're doing a 3-chapter or 7-chapter, all those things are just variations on the theme. So you may not actually have to do these per se, and yet still these ideas are important. So the people in the room are mostly writing, but not yet to this section. We have some, about 30%, who are writing and who have done this. And thank you to those who sent on the things that we're going to be using as conversation today. Okay, so we're going to discuss a little bit. So those of you who have been here before, I would like a sentence or two typed into the chat, please. How is it going? Specifically around a couple of things. How are you solid now? Are you getting solid in your habits? Are you working a little bit all the time? And are you beginning to see some momentum under this work as a result? Is there anything particular that's hanging you up? If I could start seeing some things to respond to, we'll have just a little discussion. I think it's important for all of you to notice that whatever your experience is, it's going to be other people's experience as well. Because you are more similar than you are different, even though you are all over the ballpark on what you are studying. The experience of having to write this stuff is pretty similar. So I'm seeing answers come in. Let's see what we say. Is there a way to connect with people? Do we have access to each other's emails? Karen, what you do have is in Big Marker, if you go to the main page, there's a members area, and you can look up people's names that you see here that said something, and you can private message them. Of course, that's like all private messaging, as useful as whether or not people watch for it. But I think Big Marker sends an email saying you got a message. So it's a pretty good chance you might hear something, and then you can exchange emails and you can get on. But that's a one-to-one situation. But another thing you can do that's maybe a broader group is that now on the pd.education site, when you go up to the directed learning section, there's a pull down for forums, and there's an opening there for a conversation for this group to have with each other. So forum conversation might work as well. Absolutely. Joining this group and the other group, is several of you are joining this group and the other group for different reasons. That's all good. You're welcome to come to as many of these sessions and just jump in and be who you are, and really, really use this. Help each other as much as I'm helping you. Slowly getting back into the groove after surgery and crisis. That's just to say there are a lot of you who are also facing life. Babies are being born, people are having disasters, and yet still this work goes on. You're welcome always for any help I can offer within the constraints of class and open office hours and now the forums. I'm glad what we talked about last week was helpful. Headings, organizing document, those are the thinking stages. Really suggest that it also is something that evolves as you go on. So I might have my headings and I might understand where I'm going when I write a book, but that doesn't mean it's what it looks like at the end. In fact, typically what happens with a book is that what I thought was one chapter becomes more than one chapter. So things get broken up into smaller chunks so the reader can understand the chunks better. Problem statement's a good place to start, although it is it has some technical issues that we'll talk about today. Good, solid work in the morning, difficult to separate work and dissertation all getting done in the same place. Ah, yes, that place where our head is here or here and they overlap actually is a little easier than if they have nothing to do with each other. Able to get in 30 minutes, that's good. You're making progress. Little bit of momentum comes with that. Building some confidence, excellent. Reviewing the models frequently helps people build confidence. You begin to get a sense of, oh, I get this. I kind of see the pattern here. I could do something. Scope creep. Other people call it chasing your tail or going down a rabbit hole. We're going to talk about that today because we're going to talk about argument and significance. Okay, focus. Just a quick tool for those of you that may be having trouble with focus. Look up Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro. It's a timer. You set how much time you want to focus. You turn on the timer. You focus. And you just don't let yourself do anything else until that timer is over. It's like a muscle. It needs to build. So don't give yourself a hard time, but think about it like building a muscle. So you can go back into the old, if you're just here now, happy to have you join whenever, and all the rest are available at that link, which I'll put in again. This link is the place to go find the ones that have been here before, and they're in the on-demand section. So you can go there. And just a little bit, always, if you can just give yourself, even now, if you're having trouble because you've got other things going, if you can just give yourself 15 minutes a day now, it'll be easier when July comes and time opens up. Models have helped. Okay, good. Thank you for that. It was a good, quick discussion. So let's get started. Oh, this came into me this week. Raise your hand in the little chat box if you can identify with this. My learning, this was from a student I'm working with. My learning, I like the discipline and it hurts my brain. I like thinking about things with the discipline, and it's thrilling when things come together. And what I think is brilliant today, I may think is garbage tomorrow. Does that sound familiar to any of you? It certainly sounds familiar to me. I think actually this actually encompasses what we like about being academics. I think we like the fact that our brains hurt, we work so hard, and that sometimes we feel brilliant, and that sometimes what is brilliant feels like garbage, because that's the constant pushing of it that is kind of what we do. So good for her to bring it to all of our attention. It's in your slides. The slides are in the handouts, just in case you want to remind yourself that this is the path you're on when either your brain is hurting or something that was great yesterday turned out not to be so great today. Okay. All right, let me just say that depending on your field, what I'm talking about today can be easy to understand or not. So if you are in the STEM area, then what is a problem? Pretty direct. Something that measures lower than you want it to measure. So you're gonna figure that out. if you're in the social sciences, let alone history or education, this becomes more difficult because an idea that a lot of people say we need to study is not necessarily a problem. Why is that? Because unless you can get to the what is going on there part of it with your research, you get the potential of being stuck in this kind of bubble of nobody quite understanding what you mean or where you're going with your ideas. So if any of you have had a problem where you just thought like, what? It is so obvious to me, and yet all the review comments you get back make it seem not so much, then it's possible that the measurement of it is what is holding you back. Just to say, it's been a problem for me as I've mentored hundreds of students, that sometimes helping somebody understand what isn't there in problem statement, purpose and significance is the hardest part of teaching this. So if you can ask whether and to what extent does X result in Y or result in this measurement, you're on your way. If we did X, would it raise this measurement? That's an evaluation study. That's got good parameters to it. How do people perceive as the contributing factors to this measurement or to this challenge or this problem? Those are, for social scientists, questions that may help you dig out that thing. Now, I've been getting, many of you have been using the self-assessment tools on the PD Education site, and I hope you're finding them helpful. I think so, because I'm getting lots of them now. And this one came in about the research problem. It was actually a problem statement. But notice what they said. Do you have a research problem? No. When you're using the self-assessments, every time you find yourself saying no, that's a clue to you to go look those things up on the site and figure out what's meant by that. Maybe you want one, because we're really looking for yeses there. So it's a clue. So they don't have a research problem, but do you know what a problem statement is? What they said was what a researcher thinks needs to be studied. No, that is not a problem statement. That is a problem. So we've got to separate that. Then could they write a problem statement? No. Well, if you're trying to write a problem statement, misunderstanding what is a problem in a problem statement, then those things will be hard. So let's break that down. Problem statement, these are the things it has. It has a compelling sentence opener that gives us a measurement, if possible, or something that compels us to think this is important. There's usually 2 paragraphs. You want to shoot for 2 paragraphs, although we'll see examples today and we'll talk about that. The first paragraph is a synthesis of the research problem and the gap in the literature, if there is one that you're filling, but it's a synthesis of research. So that means it's like 3 sentences, and those sentences have multi-author citations at the end of them. So we're seeing these are the most important things in this area of your field, and lots of people agree these things are important, or that there is this and it's important, and there is this and it's important, but there's nothing in the middle, therefore you have a gap. The problem is a problem to whom? Why? What damage does it cause? What are the specifics? So those of you in STEM can identify with this more. It's not a to whom, but it's a problem in what way? Why is it a problem? Why do we need to understand how this cell mutates in this certain manner? Why do we need to know why a food crop is, that if we genetically do something to that particular crop, it'll be better for us. whatever your study, if you're an engineer and you're doing computer science, why do we need to understand the challenge? That's part of the problem statement. The second paragraph is the purpose, kind of like the purpose of the research. But it includes a theoretical, based on this theoretical problem, answering these questions, we're going to get to a solution that answers this problem. And I have so many resources for you to dig into this that there's no reason that after today and digging into those resources, you should have any question where you're going. We even have problem statement. Yeah, we have lots of things on the site that will help, and I'll give you those in a minute. I'm not going to talk about significance here. I'm just going to say that there's some things that go back and forth. We're going to get to that in a while. Okay, just with that understanding. So what are you looking for? Let me just say, you're looking for compelling sentence. You're looking for synthesis of research. That's got citations. You're looking for the problem to whom and how it's going to be studied. Let's just read these. And then what I want to see you do is tell me on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being they pinned it, 4 being pretty good, maybe there's a thing or two missing, 3 being neutral, you can't really tell if this is a good one or not, 2 being has significant issues that you can identify, and 1 being start over. I'm going to read these, we're going to vote on them, you're going to see how they change per how you feel about them changes. What my goal is here, we have several. My goal is that you're going to be able to read these and judge them, okay? Because if you can do that, you can read and judge your own, and that's a really good thing. All right, here we go. The global population is expected to jump to 9.7 billion by the year 2050, and food production must increase by 70% on less arable land to sustain this 33% population increase. It remains an essential, and I cut this down a lot. There's a lot in this one that I didn't think was going to mess with our understanding. It remains an essential challenge to increase crop yield, resilience, and nutrition if we hope to achieve global sustainability. While gene manipulation can broaden the horizons of crop improvement, current techniques are far from fully optimized. Our research aims to bypass transgenic regulations and arduous tissue regeneration involved with current low-throughput gene editing methods. Carbon nanotubes designed by Demir of UC Berkeley have been shown to passively diffuse through plant cell walls, and when loaded with plasmic DNA cargo, can aid in transient expression of foreign DNA in undamaged plant cells. CNTs could provide a passive mechanism to transform mature plant embryos with clustered regulatory interspaced short palindromic repeats machinery that could make precise genetic alterations in germline precursor cells. Speed produced by these gene-altered plants would inherit the same alterations, creating a generation of plants with desired gene edits. Okay, what do you think? 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. And good that I'm seeing some of you having conversations in the chat. What do you think? 3s, neutral, not sure. So far 3, maybe a 4. Good. Okay, so this is, so far, I'm assuming if anybody has a vastly different vote, they're typing it in. So far, what we see here is that there's a very good beginning. We're going to need more food. And the research and the technical aspects of the pieces that are going to be put together in order to do the research are also there. The perhaps more there than we need in a problem statement. That depends on how much lead in we have. Because if these things have been discussed in the context of the study, which is quite possible, then it could be a more simple statement about that these things could go together in a certain way, and it would be a good thing for us to test. But it's not an unheard of response. What isn't here may not need to be here, but it depends on what you're writing to, is that we see the purpose of the research and we have some ideas about it, but we don't know how it's going to be done. So an extra sentence or two that would say this study would will manipulate a certain number of cells, will do whatever the physical aspect of the study would probably bring it up to a 4 or a 5 rather than a 3 or 4. So some people are getting comments. I got a bit lost when moving from the big picture to the details. That's a good point. Could have been that there was a little bit more in that middle part that I cut out. I was trying to make it fit on the slide and give you all the parts. The jargon in the third paragraph threw some readers. So that's why I'm suggesting, if you can, do the technical language in another section and make this problem statement as pretty jargon-free as possible. You will get more people to actually read your stuff if you have serious sections of it that you try to stay away from the field level specifics. Okay, so that's what happened there. Let's see another one. This is an engineering problem, and I'm bringing it in because the person who sent it gave me a highlight that they were pretty pleased with it for a certain reason. And that leads us to the fact that significance is often in multiple places. So we can be significant to our field, to our business or context, to the specifics of a very little tiny part of engineering, and our significance statement can have multiple levels. And so this is a problem statement that tried to address the different levels of the problem. Let's see how you vote they did. A large population of the human portion of the human population is living in water scarce areas. Despite the prevalence of water on Earth, most water is unfortunately not of sufficient quality for consumption and requires some form of treatment. Wave energy converters can harvest energy from ocean waves and can reduce the reliance of coastal communities on fossil fuels. However, the variability of power generated in the wave energy conversion process poses a challenge to conventional power grid infrastructures, and especially not well tolerated by small-scale power grids typical of developing coastal regions. Direct coupling of the wave energy conversion process and the reverse osmosis desalination process in a self-contained fluid power circuit has been proposed as useful means for using local energy resources to meet water needs. This approach circumvents the need to integrate wave energy conversion into power grids. However, the variability that make wave energy challenging to integrate into a power grid also poses a challenge to the design of the wave energy conversion process itself, let alone direct coupling to a reverse osmosis process, which places additional constraints on the variation in pressure in the system. Choices available to the engineer include etc. And the proposed work addresses this lack of understanding in the design of these systems. First, a mathematical model that captures the relevant physics of pipelines in wave energy converting systems will be selected and combined with other state-of-the-art component models to study the trade-offs involved in the design of high and low pressure branches of a baseline system configuration. Then several proposed alterations to the baseline system that follow from state-of-the-art fluid power approaches and the design trade-offs they present for wave-powered reverse osmosis will be examined in order to better understand how the engineer might address the design of these systems. Okay. What do we think? We got a 4.5 put in already. Please vote. And I skipped over that long paragraph, but it didn't skip over it because it's not important or it shouldn't be there. I skipped over it because it's very specifically engineering, and we could see the structure without those specifics. So we're saying it has a logical flow. We're given a 4.5. Other people have a 5. Those of you who might not think it's so perfect, don't be hesitant to vote. What are we seeing? If you had something to say to this author that you might think tighten it up, what would you say? So as you're writing, and I think it's good for the author to hear whatever it is you have to say, my goal in our coursework is to help you get to a level where your work ticks the boxes and is clear and somebody can read it and they can know what it is you're doing. At that point, you go on to your supervisor and your supervisor helps you do whatever the jumps that you have to, or the hoops you have to jump through for your specific committee. This would be at that level. I would say to this person, go show it to your supervisor. You're going to get then that person who is knowledgeable about the ins and outs of your research will ask you questions based on this that are at a level not to be covered in this kind of a class. So well done. And I think that what the person wanted to do was to show this is going to come up later in its significance, wants to show that this thing is potentially useful at a lot of levels. And I think this is well on its way to doing that. Is the length of the problem statement of concern? Beautiful question, Heather. And it totally depends on your committee. So we suggest a 2-paragraph short, much shorter than this. But this person is, when you break that rule, break it for a reason. And the reason this is multiple paragraphs is that this person wanted something to show that these were significant at a lot of levels, and each one of those paragraphs does it. So all you need to be able to do is, if you're going to break one of these kind of rules that aren't really rules, you need to have a reason for doing it. So that when somebody says your problem statement's too long, you can say, you know, I looked at that, but I decided I was going to do it for this reason. This person had a reason, told me about it when they sent me the document. So good example. Thank you for sending it. Okay, now this person is not doing exactly the model we're talking about. So again, remember that what we're talking about are art forms, not hardcore rules. So this person has a problem statement, but then the purpose and the research questions together kind of go into the what would be in a second paragraph on some problem statements. And I don't know enough about what they're writing to at their university to say, is this something they should concern themselves with to make it a second paragraph, or is this going to be just fine? Depends on their committee. What counts is, do you have all the stuff you need? So, and is it consciously written enough you can understand it? So among the more than 6,500 food desert census tracts in the United States, roughly 75% are in urban areas, while the remaining 25% are rural, undated report. The Economic Research Service of the United States Department of Agriculture defines food deserts as low-income census tracts where at least 33% or 500 residents have limited access to a supermarket or a large grocery store. Most research on urban food deserts has employed spatial measures of accessibility, recording distances to various food stores from the place of residence. The ease with which the distance can be traversed is the critical issue, not the distance itself. Therefore, access to a car is far more important considerations than access to a full-service supermarket. Research on urban food access could benefit by studying how food access is intertwined with broader livability issues such as transportation. Purpose statement. So then let's see if these next two together lead us towards what would be that second paragraph. The purpose of this qualitative exploratory study is to understand the role of transportation of Baltimore residents participating in the grocery access program in low-income neighborhoods in South and West Baltimore during the 6-month pilot program in 2020. And ask these questions. What are the transportation-related barriers? How feasible and acceptable is ride sharing? And what role would or does a ride share program play? So it's obviously an evaluation of a ride share program to help people get food. So what do you think? Given the fact that this might be a different format than we're strictly talking about, would it make a 4 or 5 or not? And then perhaps you want to say, do you think actually, even if it's going to have a purpose statement and research questions, would it still benefit from that second paragraph? So coming in first is the idea that it works. Would it benefit? I like the funneling that's embedded within the opening paragraph, but then more transitions and connections need to be made to make the flow and logically consistent. Other than the third example, I have noticed none had references listed in the background leading. What is the exception? Expectations here are you list your references. This one's better than the others, but my expectation as an examiner is I want to see this to be a very short, concise squeeze of your lit. I want to see that you're basing it on something that other research has dealt with to answer as an examiner, that's what I look for. And the first paragraph has a lot of citations, second paragraph, not so much. But Karen, when you go through our other resources, you'll see really good examples of that. Okay, looks like that's not any other stuff isn't coming in. Let's do another one. And I hope you see that these are all over the place as far as the field, but there's consistency amongst them. Studies including VPD and or VMC continue to increase in popularity for researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. In the area of English as a second language or bilingual education, research on the impact of VPD and or VMC are scant. The research implies that teachers receive countless hours of VPD, but the impact of that training does not transfer to quality instruction. This could be because VPD focuses on the transfer of knowledge with minimal opportunities to demonstrate implementation of knowledge in everyday instruction. Researchers have argued that a high number of practitioners working with ELS lack preparation for the growing number of ELSs. More recently, Tong stressed the need for individualized support like VMC to support teachers' application of knowledge learned in VMP. Because VMC embedded in VMP has reported increases in teachers' professional growth, it is worth examining how teachers' professional growth might be supported by VMC embedded in VPD. Okay, so So yes, there is the VPD and VMC, and it needs to be explained, and we have to assume that that was done in the paragraph just before the one I cut. But even if we don't know what these mean, we can see the flow of the ideas. I must say that we have to watch out for our the biggest challenge is jargon, especially when it's used a half a dozen times in one paragraph. It becomes really hard to read, even if these things you totally know what they say. So it's a challenge for you as a writer to figure out how to make these sentences without repeating this stuff in exactly the same way all the time. So this person is getting 3s, and I think the 3s, as Heather points out, is that there's no idea. This sets up the why we might care, but not the how what we're going to do about it part of a problem statement. So it talks about the general problem, but it doesn't talk about your problem. So that's how you might think about those 2 paragraphs. The general problem is what the citations and what this is, and it's something we should consider, but your problem is how to take those ideas and put them into a study, and that's the second paragraph. So good. You got 2, 3 good beginning, doesn't have the second paragraph, so it couldn't be more than that at this point. And watch out for the not people taking things. When you have the important sections, I know the rules are once you say it once, you don't have to say it again. You can just use those in acronyms. But you also have to be conscious of the fact that people will take your document and they will only look at certain sections. They're going to look at the abstract. They're going to look at your discussion. They might look at your problem statement. So when people are parsing your stuff out, are they getting all that they need? Is a question you should just have in the back of your mind that you have to wrestle with as a writer and decide. This is an education problem. There is a problem in pedagogy and the nature of science, even in the inception of the next generation science standards. Despite the inclusion and reference to nature of science in those standards, accurate, effective, and explicit teaching of the nature of science continues to be dismally addressed in the science discourse. By the way, stay away from words like dismally. That's your opinion. Don't put them in there. This problem has negatively impacted science literacy of students victims of the problem, because overall performance on state assessment shows that since the inception of this, only 2% of students perform at the advanced level, while between 26 and 34% perform at the proficient level. Current data show that since the inception of this and GSS, there have been overall decline in science performance, and there's some data. A possible cause of this problem is the lack of explicit integration of the NOS into science discourse. Learning more about the relationship between teacher perception of the nature of science, explicit integration in the curriculum that follows the next generation science standards, and school performance on state assessments could help National Science Teachers Association to develop more explicit address of the nature of science in science instruction and lead to improved scientific literacy and overall performance on science assessments. A mixed method approach research design, which investigates teacher perception of nature of science and the impact of the current curriculum on their perception and its relationship to assessment scores, could remedy the situation by informing professional development to address the apathy towards the nature of science emphasis in the science discourse. Data from the Views of Nature of Science questionnaire for educators developed by Lederman, semi-structured interviews, state science assessment scores, and lesson plans will be examined. Okay, so what do you think? We have some sentences are too long. Yep, have to watch that. It's a writing problem, a little bit choppy or a little bit hard to get as a result. Hard to know exactly what some things might mean. 3.5 or 4, all the pieces are there. Vocabulary needs to be tightened. Might be helped by being broken into 2 paragraphs, because the second paragraph about the mixed method approach, etc., remember, a paragraph should only have one thought, one point. So this is a paragraph that's trying to make 2 points, and that causes some of the cognitive tension. Includes a description. The only thing that's funneling is that the funneling is overly focused on the general problem as opposed to the specific problem of the particular story. Very keen, Adrian. Spot on. If you're going to be saying that your significance is general and specific, make sure that the way the rest of it writes also writes to the general and to the specific. Okay. Another one that might be 2 together. It's important to have a much more comprehensive understanding of a student's lived experience in relation to attending a particular program. The mental health crisis on college campuses across the country is not likely to decrease anytime soon, especially as the 2020 pandemic imparts new levels of trauma in many people's lives. Post-secondary institutions have a limited amount of resources to hire more therapists and implement a myriad of co-curricular campus life and mental health programs. While a small body of research has examined the relationship between AAI programs and college student mental health, one facet of sound mental health, a sense of belonging, has received almost no attention in the AAI literature, especially in a purposeful and systematic fashion. So if we were to take that and then look at this next sentence, the purpose of this study is to explore, understand, and develop new knowledge about college students' perceptions of their mental health and sense of belonging after attending an AAI program called Pet Away Worry Stress Pause at the University of Minnesota. And then that purpose could be this person's writing in the eyes, which wouldn't be the way you would write a problem statement. So the students will be asked a range of questions that can be summarized with situations such as, and this is how the pause system will work. This study investigates an understanding of a student's sense of belonging as a possible outcome of attending pause as a possible moderator of one's mental health. This study uses a case study approach and is guided by the need to belong theory, student identity, development theory, and ecological theory. So, some of you know the pause program. That's good. If you saw the way I was rewording those same sentences into the more genetic one, what I liked about this one, I'll just say, is I like the fact it looked very nicely how it includes a theoretical part. It's the only one we've seen that's put the theoretical foundation in, and I think that second, now we'll talk about purpose, and we'll see where the overlaps are. But the people in the room are giving it 3s and 4s. So pretty close, not spot on. All right, so now I want to break away from this, and we'll have one more exercise in a minute. So we have talked about the problem statement, and it has those things on the left. What we haven't talked about is the significance and how the two go together, and they're side by side. Yes, something about theoretical, Karen, that last person did, I don't want to go back, but did tie in a theoretical stance on belonging, I believe. It's in your slides. Okay, so you have two exercises. Notice that theoretical foundation and research questions could be included in that second paragraph. You have some options there. So then you have the significance. The significance also has a strong sentence opener. In fact, all three of these sections, you really want to work out the strength of your sentence openers. And then you want to funnel the significance of your work through as many of these as it fits. How is it significant to the field? How is it significant in your local context? How is it significant specifically to others, like organizations that might be helping you get the data, like the people who are giving you data? Maybe they're going to want to know the data, those kinds of things. And then a statement about how you will answer your questions, how this significance answers the questions, or something that establishes the credibility of the design. Now, this also works in the STEMs. I know, even though our language is often social sciencey oriented, the people in engineering, as we saw earlier, also can have things funnel from the importance of engineering in general to the world in general, to then engineering, to then studying the context in the field, and then to the human beings that are being touched by the outcome of it. And that's true in any of our sciences. Significance can be across many, many levels. So this person gave me both, and I just thought maybe this was a good place to put the juxtaposition. And so what you're voting on in this one, and you have to do some typing, is kind of 3, 4, 5 on the problem statement, and then to what extent do you think the significance pins it, given what you've seen in the problem statement? And I liked it because it was an unusual topic for us to consider. The wearing of reproductions is hardly a 21st century phenomenon. Wearing reproductions to costume parties were all the rage in the late Victorian era New York, for example. Men and women would model their costumes on those of English monarchy and the French court. Attendees copied every minute detail from historical portraits. Guests masqueraded as Henry VIII or VII, Elizabeth I, and Marie Antoinette, among a parade of other memorable and notorious figures from European past. There are modern, and then it's cited. There are modern researchers who study the relationships of authenticity and functionality of these garments, such as these researchers studied the Jane Austen Club attendees. Other researchers explored authenticity among military hobbyists rather than museum professionals who have educational resources to use. These participants are hobbyists rather than museum professionals. To study dress, extent, or reproduced as acts of authenticity and collective memory is a relatively new paradigm. And there's a bunch of people to do so within the context of historical interpretation at history museums, which incorporates an educational mission to interpret history, has yet to be done. Studies on visitor perception of interpreter dress has been conducted internally by such locations as Colonial Williamsburg. These studies, however, are programmatically evaluative and tend to focus on the entirety of the visitor's experience. Articles that are not programmatic evaluations are published to promote a particular type of interpretive or child-oriented educational strategy. And I really wish that sentence had paragraph had 1 or 2 more sentences about this study will do this other thing and measure it in this other way. Because I think that definitely, but let's assume it's there. Because we want to look at that as a totality, and then we want to say, okay, now this other piece is the significance. The way in which interpreters and visitors engage with dress reproduction to understand relationships of authenticity and memory has yet to be addressed. Discussions of dress and memory have been prevalent in the past decade, but such research concentrates on the individual and the individual's personal attachment to the dress. Extant and reproduction dress is missing from scholarly discussions of museums and memory, with few exceptions, usually related to cultural trauma. There exists an opportunity at living history museums to study the relationships between extant materials, reproductions, authenticity, and memory. So we're not just looking at the one on the left, which is the problem statement this time. We're looking at whether or not we think the significance on the right does what it needs to do to back up, or remember, significance is what you're graded on, in a sense. You have to do it, you have to prove it, and at the end you have to say you've done it. That one section of your work hangs your claim, it hangs just really why anybody should read you. So what do we think about these two? 4, the opening sentence really grabbed my attention. The author obviously has a way with words. That being said, I wish the writing had been more concise and really pinpoint the research problem. I agree. The problem statement is lost. Yep. Okay. I agree. There was too much in the first, too much lit, too much didn't get us to what the problem is. As people who don't understand it, we're going to be confused. How about the significance part? What do you vote on that? We don't have any votes? We're all reading. Okay, why should the field care? That might be a little strong, but I don't think the significance hits it at all. I don't think so. I think this is probably a really interesting study. And I think it's a kind of study that could move a whole section of that. I mean, I personally think that if I went to a museum, if I went to something that was an academically oriented place, I would really notice the dress of people. And because I've had that experience in going to cultural reproductive places where they're reproducing, it happens all over Ireland, people are dressed as they would have been dressed when we go to those experiences. And I think dress adds a lot. I can imagine it adding a lot also in a more academically oriented setting. And so I think it's an important study. I think it could actually move ahead our experience of places. But it's a big picture. So better understanding of how people respond to people dressed in period dress in different situations. That's the big topic, not necessarily just in this, but it adds to that. Smaller, it may give new thoughts to the fields that are already being studied, because it will be a counterpoint to them. And then specifically at the bottom, it helps the field that you're in know itself better and take on some new and innovative ideas. And the question 2, Erica brings up, how is it going to be measured? I really want to see those 2 sentences in the problem statement. Okay, so let's talk about purpose. I've been working with a bunch of students who are doing a 3-chapter dissertation, and they only have to write for the first, I don't want to make it sound like they don't, but their first chapter is a merge of what is in the 5-chapter dissertation, chapters 1 and 2. So they've taken this model that they're working with, has taken all of the first chapter, which has a lot of things in it. Oftentimes it has definitions, it has a whole bunch about your field, etc. And they basically have to do a few paragraphs as a talking about the concept, and then they have to do problem statement, purpose, and significance. That, I like it. It's a good model in that it hones it down to the 3 most important parts, so you don't get, because all the other things you put in chapter 1 could really not be there. If you get these 3 right, you're not going to get sent back to the beginning because you didn't have your definitions well done or some of the other things that are in chapter 1. So significance is what it all hangs on. It's the reason you're writing chapter 1. It's what your whole everything hangs on. It is where and you rewrite it at the end, because at the end you have changed your argument. For those of you that are here, and you also are in the other class, your argument changes at the beginning. When you're just writing, your argument is that your research idea is significant enough to the field, to other people, to other things, that significance, that it should be allowed to go on and be studied. Once you have your data, then you have something to say. You have developed expertise on this problem. And then these 3 things get rewritten because your problem statement gets tightened to really spit out at the end what you learned. The purpose in the middle probably stays similar, but the significance then absolutely has to lead to what you found. So you have these 3 things. They're important. We've studied the first 2. So what's the purpose? Well, it's pretty simple. That you're going to do work solving that problem because of those 3 significant areas, using a particular methodology that will do this thing on the left so that you can get to that thing on the right. You can tell by the way I set this up, can't you? I recommend you do your problem statement, you do your significance, you get them really well done, and then you put the purpose statement in the middle that does basically just that. And it'll be small and it'll be tight and you won't go on too much, and it'll give your reader what they need to go from one to another here. You get these 3 things set up. Of course, yours go this way, but you get them nicely done this way. You might even do slides to see how they look next to each other. You get that tight, and your supervisors, fingers crossed I'm right about this, you'll have to come back to me, but I think your supervisors will be able to look at it and say, oh, all right. And then they're going to start asking a different kind of question. I've been working with some people in the other class that have their data or are having difficulty getting their data. And what I'm seeing is that some supervisors weren't given the opportunity or didn't think to question whether or not you could get your data, which is what we'll begin to talk about next week. We're getting close to time. I just want to tell you that there's a whole page of resources this is all about, and if you're a master's student, there's some there for you as well. But this is all about that problem statement. This is all about resources, and I want you to look up significance. I want you to look up significance in your field, because different fields use the word significance differently. And if you're a quantitative person, it means different things than if you're a qualitative oriented methodology. So figure that out too when you're writing significance. It isn't just importance. It also gets tied into numbers, and certain kinds of fields have written a lot about what significance means in their field. So you better know that when you're writing. I'm just going to tie ahead. We're out of time, but if you're writing, and you're going right ahead and you've got these 3 sections and you're okay, your next step is to write the methodology. Don't go to lit next, because just like we had significance and problem, and then we had problem in the middle, we have a background and methodology, and we put lit in the middle. So if you're writing, that's my recommendation. If you aren't there yet, then these are the things you should have to catch up. And you can spend the week catching up. You should have your MS Word set up properly. You should have, and there's a whole lot of snippets in the PD education you should have watched to set up MS Word properly. If you don't do that now, you're going to cost yourself tons of time you don't need to spend. If you have a template, you need to have it up. You need to have your work up in that template. You need to have your intro paragraph or 2 about the context of your study kind of mapped out where you like it. And then you want to go into problem statement, purpose, and significance. And if you're doing a 5-chapter model, you begin to work on the other things in your chapter. We're not going to cover those other things in depth. We just don't have the time. And they're not, you can look at your models and you can bring them in, and I don't have any hesitation. If you're still thinking about your research, you have a conversations portion in the forums, and I want you to upload your research design bubbles and your argument. So I would like to see them and help you with that. Just ask you some questions, just give you a little bit of helping you move on. I will do it through the forum. So there's some specific use in PD education. You go to directed learning, you go to the forum, and I will try to work the forum 6 days a week, every day but Saturday. So far it hasn't gotten used much, but and it depends. Sometimes it might be too used. This is what's coming up next. Office hours right now. I'm rushing off to, not recorded. It's a free-for-all. Office hours tomorrow. I answered the questions that have gone up to wooclap.com/summerqs. New page, put up new questions. I'll see you next week when it comes to pitching methodologies. The forum is up go to your PD education site, Heather, and up at the top, it's self-directed learning is the first menu. Click on that and forum is there. Okay? I'm going to leave the room open. I think I can leave the room open. It looked like some of you might want to talk. I don't know. I'm going to go to office hours. Let me turn off the recording.